All right, we'll get started. That's why we're doing this, so we can kind of work out the kinks before we try and present it to people outside. So, like I was saying before, Diane said I was cutting in and out, so I'll just kind of start over. This test webinar is basically just, like I said, so we can work out the kinks and kind of figure out what, how this thing works before we do any presentations to the public. Make sure that it's a decent presentation and we don't have all kinds of issues. But the other purpose of this is so everyone can kind of learn how to use the GoToWebinar service so that other people in the department can put on their own webinars if they would like to. So let's get started. So using the GoToWebinar service. Getting started, the first thing is that an administrator must add you as an organizer. So if you are planning on doing your own webinar, you want to present something to the public, you have to be added as an organizer. And with our account for ESD, we can only have one organizer at a time. To have multiple organizers, the price kind of skyrockets. So we just have the one. And the administrators are Diane and I. So if you do want to put on a webinar, either one of us could add you as the organizer. And the organizer role isn't permanent. It's just whoever is doing a webinar at one time, that's the person who has to be the organizer. So right now I'm the administrator and the organizer, but since the next webinar will be done by Wendy, I'm going to pass the organizer role to her. And then once hers is done, I will be passing it back to myself. So once you're added as an organizer, you'll get an invitation via email. And there will be a link that you click on, and all you'll have to do is go to the link, and then you'll have to download the GoToWebinar service. So it's just the software will be installed on your computer. And once you receive that, you can either go to GoToWebinar.com or you can go to the program. And with the webinar service, we also received GoToMeeting. There is a difference between the two of them, so you want to make sure that you schedule the webinar and not the meeting. And there will be this little icon on your screen. It looks like a little blue asterisk or flower kind of thing. So you make sure that you click on the webinar and not the meeting. So go to the program or go to webinar.com and you choose Schedule Webinar, and the website will open if you use the program rather than the website. It's really, really simple. You can also choose to do a webinar now, which then it launches it right away. So like I said, the website will then open. So to set up your webinar, there are a few options. If you've done a webinar in the past, you can select Schedule Similar Webinar, and it will have the same settings as a past webinar. It doesn't have to have the same title or anything like that. But if you want to have the same questions for registration, the same presenters, things like that, you can hit Schedule Similar Webinar, and that will apply the previous settings so you don't have to go through as much stuff setting it up. And then if you're doing the same one multiple times, you can apply the same settings as well, and you won't have to fill out the form. And this is what the form looks like. This was easier than just doing screenshots than actually showing you the screen and having to go back and forth. So you can see right at the top, right here, it shows the Schedule Similar Webinar. You type in the name, a description, and when you put the description, that's what will show up on the registration page, so that's really important for people to know what the webinar is actually about. The date, the time, whether or not it recurs, and so you can schedule multiple at one time. And then the audio conferencing options. So there are two options. You can use your own service or built-in audio conferencing. I just use theirs because that's what they recommend and it's easiest. And you can also give people options to use a microphone and speakers, a long-distance phone number, and a toll-free number. And in order to use the toll-free number, we have to pay more, so don't select that basically. But the long-distance number, that's where they can call in, and I did both just so people can have multiple options in case they don't have a microphone and speakers, or if they don't want to pay long-distance charges. And then down here, you can see, well, actually I'm going to use this fun feature. right here, there's a highlighter, you can see the co-organizers and panelists. And that way, if you have multiple people who will be presenting on your webinar, you can do you can add them there, and then they'll be able to present in the webinar. So then you just save and continue. And now this pen thing won't. Oh, there we go. I got rid of it. So the next thing you do after you hit Save Your Webinar is you do the branding and theme. And so this is what shows up when when people are registering for the webinar, when they go to the registration link. It's the branding and theme. So you can upload your logo, like I had the City of Superior logo uploaded. You can choose from different themes. So there are a few to pick from, and then you can customize the waiting room, list the presenters, and upload photos, and put a welcome message. So this just shows that form. You upload the logo right up here, and it does, I think, have to be a pretty small size, so I actually had to compress the city logo so that it would upload. And then choosing your theme, I chose the training. It's the green one. It's what you saw when you registered and when you were waiting for the webinar to start. But the theme has a picture of a random lady. It's just a stock photo, so I uploaded a custom image of just a raindrop. And then the waiting room, you can change the color and things like that. List whether or not you want the presenters listed in the waiting room. So you could say, if I'm presenting at this one, I would put my name, title, and organization. But if there were also other people presenting, you could add them as well, and also add images of them so that people could see who was talking and who was presenting to them. And the nice thing about that is down here you can actually preview the theme in the waiting room, so you make sure that what they're seeing is what you want them to see, and if not, you can make the changes up here. And you can also add the welcome message. So like when you were waiting for it to begin, it said, "Welcome to the test webinar. We will begin shortly." So you can put pretty much whatever you want to down there. But most webinars that I've seen have had "we will begin shortly," basically. So that's branding. So then you can save and move on to registration. And this one is important because it tells you what kind of information you're going to get about the people participating in the webinar. So you decide what information they must provide. And then at the end of the webinar, you'll get a report about who registered and whatever information you asked them. So this is the form. So GoToWebinar, the service requires that you have first name, last name, and email address. And the reason they require email address is just so the millions of reminders that get sent out, they have someone to send them to. But you can also decide address, city, state, all the stuff that's up there, or create your own questions and you just type them in down there, and you can check whether or not they're required. So you can give people the option to add all of these, but you can make it so they don't have to, or you can require it. So for the ones that we're doing for our webinar series, I required, obviously, their name, email address. I didn't do address, but I did do city, state, just so we could get an idea of who was listening from Superior. And then I also added a new question that Wendy came up with, which was, are you interested in getting information about future webinars or other public education opportunities? And that was just so that we could potentially create an email list to send to people so that more people would attend the webinars. But that's entirely up to you if you want to add your own question. And then down here it will show you where the questions are, where it says your questions, and then you can just hit the edit button if you want to make changes to them. And then you can preview your registration right down here, and then it'll save and email you the invitation. So you'll get an invitation to your Outlook calendar, and it will add it to your calendar. But people, even if they add it to their calendar, they'll still have to click the registration link. And I think that was one of the problems we had when I first sent it out to ESD, was that a lot of people accepted the meeting but didn't actually register. So you have to be aware of that. So that is registration. The next thing, which is the most important, is running the webinar. So we will talk about that, and I'll just show you some screenshots. When it's time to run the webinar, you can go to the website, GoToWebinar.com, and there's a Start Webinar button, and then the control pane will pop up. And they won't let you see the control pane when you're actually running the webinar, because I wanted to just be able to show my screen. For some reason, the screen's going in and out. Okay, I think I got it. But yeah, for some reason it won't let you show the control panel. So I just had to do screenshots. So bear with me. I will show you those in just a second. Here we go. Okay. So hopefully you guys can all see that. It looks like you can. So this is what the control panel looks like. This pops up as soon as you start your webinar, and it'll usually have you, run a Java something or other. But this is your control pane. It's present through the whole webinar, and as an attendee, you probably see some version of this. But this is where you decide whether or not to show your screen, and it has a lot of features on it. So show your screen, the button is right there, and then you have like start recording. You have to make sure that you do that if you want to archive your recording at all. There's a dashboard that shows you how long, how many people are there, attentive, all kinds of stuff in here. So the dashboard, the attentive thing on the dashboard is kind of interesting. I didn't know that they could do this. It tells you how many people are watching it in the foreground and how many people have it in the background. So I can see basically if you have something open in front of the webinar. So that's good to know how much attention people are paying. And then the audio down here just shows mic and speakers and telephone. So when I was having issues with my mic and speakers, I just clicked on the telephone button and instructions popped up for where I needed to dial into, what the code I had to enter was. So the dashboard is actually really super helpful and has all kinds of good stuff. So this is another screenshot of the dashboard. And for the show my screen, this is pretty interesting. So if you have multiple monitors, you can choose between the different monitors. So screen of monitor 1, screen of monitor 1 clean, and then you have the other monitors. Or you can choose a specific application. So I had a Prezi open previously, and the Prezi, which was like the PowerPoint type thing, I just selected that from this list, and that was the only thing that it showed. So it wouldn't show if something from Outlook popped up or anything like that. But showing it clean, there's this little gray box around, and that just tells you that if you select a clean screen, it will remove all of your icons. So all you'll see is whatever is showing on the screen, not the things at the bottom on the toolbars or anything like that. So that's what that is. And then, again, this is just the timer and attendance and attentiveness. That's not really that important. This one I thought was pretty interesting. This shows you what your audience is seeing. So if you go to audience view, I know it's kind of hard to see, it's a little fuzzy, but if you go to audience view, that shows you everything that the audience is seeing. So actually on the dashboard for this webinar right now, I can see my screen and you seeing my screen. So it's kind of interesting. So you can make sure that they're seeing what you want them to see, and if not, you can adjust the settings in the Show My Screen area. Down here, this is the list of your attendees where you can select mute all. That's actually probably a really good thing to make sure you do right at the beginning of the webinar. We were listening to one earlier where someone was not muted and had a conversation through the entire webinar. So you want to select mute all right from the beginning. But another thing you can do here is if there's someone who hasn't registered for the webinar and you think they would like it, you can go to right here, invite others. And someone asked a question. Sorry, I'm trying to learn this at the same time. It doesn't. So Ruby asked a question. It asked if it showed her as inattentive, and that actually brings up a good point. It does not. If you have it in the foreground of one of your screens, it's showing you as attentive. So I think right now 33% is inattentive. So yeah. So I guess if you have it in the foreground of one of your screens, you're good, and that considers you as attentive. But yeah, back to this. So if there's someone who you wanted to attend the webinar, but they're not registered, once you're in the webinar, even if it's begun, you can invite them. Just click Invite Others, and then send them an email and tell them to go to joinwebinar.com and enter that ID, and it'll automatically invite them to the webinar. So I don't know if there is someone who you need to be at the webinar, you can just do that, or you can call them and say that, but you can do that in the middle of the webinar if you want to. I wouldn't recommend calling somebody while you're presenting, though. So the next thing we've got is the poll question. So the polls, you just click on this, and like on this, on this little dashboard, you can select a poll. So my poll is, does the poll feature work? So you click on it, and then you hit launch. So then you should all have that now, the poll question. I don't know if it popped up. So then, yep, so someone answered, 50% of you have voted, 67%. So I can see how many people have voted, so then I know when to close the poll. So everyone has voted, so I'm going to close it. So that's what the poll feature does. It's really easy, and you set the polls up when you're setting up the webinar. And don't worry if you forget to set one up. You can always go back and edit the webinar once you have already set it up. So that's how the poll feature works. And then once the webinar is over, you actually get a report about what everyone answered. So it's kind of nice, and all their registration data and all that. So the next thing is the questions. Some people have asked questions. I haven't answered any of them, like via typing, but this is where I can see the questions and whether or not I answered it. And you can choose to send it privately or send it to everyone. So if someone asks you a question and you want to respond just to them, which it's really up to you, then you can see there what you've done, and you can choose whether to send it to them or send it to everyone. Like I said, this dashboard has all kinds of features, and it's really, really easy to use. So that's the end of those. Let me choose to show my other screen. So hold on, you're going to lose the screen for just a second. All right, there we go. So you should be able to see the other screen again. Oh, that's great. Let me just click through this. I don't know why it did that. And this is why we needed to do a practice webinar. Okay, so that's pretty much it for how to use the GoToWebinar and set your webinar up. But there are some important things to remember. So recording of the webinar, like I showed you at the top, you could choose how to record in the dashboard. You can either record it in the GoToWebinar company format or the Windows Media, I think that should be WMP, the Windows Media Player format for archiving. I'm suggesting that you do it in the Windows Media Player format, because that way if we stop paying for the GoToWebinar service, you'll still have your file. So that'll just save to your computer after you end the webinar. And then you can just put it on YouTube, put it on the website, whatever you want to do with it, but that way you'll have the file forever, basically. And another important point is that organizers can leave the webinar, but only if another organizer is present. So for us, if you're the person who organized the webinar, you pretty much have to stick it out, because we can only have one organizer at a time. And the last point, which I already touched on, is that you need to make sure that you're using GoToWebinar, not GoToMeeting, because that's how, when I originally sent the emails out, I accidentally made it a GoToMeeting request and not GoToWebinar request, so that ended up being a problem. So you need to make sure that you click on the GoToWebinar icon, not the GoToMeeting icon, because the webinars can accommodate up to 100 people, whereas the meetings can only have 25. And I mean, whether or not we'll get more than 25 people participating remains to be seen, but if you want it to be more of a webinar format, then you need to make sure you click on that and not GoToMeeting. And I'll just briefly talk about GoToMeeting. I didn't do screenshots because it's very similar to GoToWebinar. Like I said, you can invite 25 people maximum. You can click on the GoToMeeting icon on your computer once you've downloaded it and after you've become an organizer. And you can say schedule a meeting or meeting now. And then similar to the webinar, you can go in and invite people once you're already in the dashboard and the meeting has already started, or you can invite people ahead of time. So you want to host a meeting, and you can pass the keyboard and the mouse around to different people, and you can screen share. So basically, it's really, really similar to GoToWebinar. It's just that there are fewer people who can join it. I don't know if anyone has any questions about GoToMeeting. I can kind of like walk you through it. It's really easy and it's very similar to the webinar. So does anyone have any questions about the GoToWebinar or GoToMeeting services right now? And you can type them in if you do. And if not right now and something else comes up, you can let me know. I spent a few days trying to figure out on and off how to use this and get it going so that we know how to use it when we actually present to people outside of the department so that it sounds decent. But I feel like I know it fairly well now. I obviously don't know everything about it, but it's pretty self-explanatory. Okay, we have one question. Let's see. But yeah, so if anyone has any questions about it, please let me know, either by asking right now or coming to ask me later. It really doesn't matter. I'm here. So looks like I have another question. No, for some reason the same question keeps popping up. That's weird. I don't know why that's happening. So I'll have to look into that. Huh. Okay. So for some reason, the same questions keep popping up. So I guess that no one has any new questions. But if you do have a new question, let me know. Just ask me. Like I said, I spent some time learning it. So I guess that's it for the webinar. I hope you guys learned something about using the service, and if not, I can show you. So thank you. That will be the end of it.